The collection of British colonies in West Africa during the colonial period were altogether called British West Africa. The British colonized these territories from the 1780s to the 1960s. The colonies they controlled included Sierra Leone, the Gambia, Nigeria, and the Gold Coast. Sierra Leone was first colonized by freed slaves from England in 1787. In 1808, Sierra Leone was made into a crown colony. Crown colonies were a type of colonial administration used by the British in their empire, in which the colonies were ruled by a ruler appointed by the monarch. From Sierra Leone, the British spread into the interior of the Gambia and Nigeria. Parts of the Gold Coast, known today as Ghana, were acquired by the British at different times. Sierra Leone and the other colonies served as bases for the British effort to block the slave trade along the coast. The British effort to stop slavery was a major reason for establishing colonies in West Africa. As we know, the British had been heavily involved in the West African slave trade during the 1700s. After the slave trade was abolished in the early 1800s, the British put a lot of effort into trying to wipe out slavery and the slave trade in all of Africa. This changed Britain's relations with West Africa. British merchants and traders developed close links with the rulers of the many different nations on the west coast of Africa, such as the rulers of Benin, Dahomey, and Asante. These nations provided Britain with gold, luxury foods, and many other goods. Throughout the 1800s, British traders and politicians became increasingly involved with the leaders of these nations. They made alliances and helped out some nations in their wars with others. By the 1880s, West Africa was dominated by Britain. A common feature of colonial administration was a policy of indirect rule. Many of the colonies became protectorates, or states that are controlled or protected by others. British West Africa was governed through indigenous rulers who ruled over their own peoples using their own customs. Sometimes this even meant removing authority from the new class of Western educated Africans and suppressing social change. Despite having a policy of indirect rule, British rule had a large impact on its colonies. An example of this is the British West African pound. This form of currency was used throughout the British West African colonies from 1907 to 1962. For ordinary West Africans, British rule brought major changes to their everyday lives. The British brought in a system of owning, buying, and selling land, which meant many Africans had to pay rent. This meant that instead of growing crops for food, they had to grow crops to sell. These were usually crops like rubber or cocoa. They also found that their traditional crafts were sometimes destroyed by competition from goods produced in British factories. Low-wage jobs were created as a result of resource exploitation. These colonies later became independent countries when the Western educated Africans, who were excluded from power under direct rule, led nationalist movements for independence. Ghana was the first to become independent in 1957. Nigeria followed in suit and became independent in 1960. Sierra Leone became dependent in 1961. Finally, Gambia was the last to gain independence in 1965.